Welcome to episode 8 of More Fun Talking Retro, a podcast born of an idea that came to me during a chocolate-induced fever dream, in which I came to the shuddering realisation that the thing we needed to do in the vintage tech and retro gaming hobby was to talk about and to the people that make up this amazing community. And whilst the temptation is there to just invite YouTubers because they love the attention and have good cameras, it's important for my credibility to include some of the less vain and more creative people who make up this hobby. And whilst I can certainly tick the creative box for today's guest, I can also put another tick in the YouTube box, because not only does he remake and respin games on vintage platforms, he also shows these off on YouTube, which kind of makes this whole introduction redundant. But let's not split hairs. Whether he's vain or just brilliant, I still want to see what makes him tick. Allan, are you clockwork or digital?
Oh, I think definitely clockwork. Yes, analog. Electronic, but not digital. How's that? Somewhere in between.
Brilliant. So this is, for people that don't recognise this face, this is Allan Turvey, who goes by the name Happy Coding ZX online, and is one of the people or the person behind Midnight Brew?
Well, I would say I'm one of the people, because obviously, there's my friend Andy, who does a lot of the graphics and the art side of things, and he's been there with me since I set it up. And then there's a few other people, who contribute games and chip in, and it's very much, as you said, it's a kind of community thing, like-minded people. It's a bit of a collective in that sense, and I suppose I'm a kind of hub for that, really. But I wouldn't say I'm the main man of the boss or anything like that, but. Well, I always wanted to do stuff on my own label. I had several games which I'd done digitally, and people had asked me to publish them, but I always thought, I'd love to do it myself. So I have a background in the music industry. I was a music promoter for about 10 or 15 years, and so know a little bit
Anyone
about
we
that.
know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, not. I wasn't working. I mean, I did about 10,000 gigs in my time. So
there just are 10,000.
Well, in the space of about 15 years. So
how can you still hear?
Well, yeah. Sometimes I wonder. Yes. No. I mean, I worked with a few people that you might know. I mean, certainly English bands. I mean, I suppose the one who went the furthest probably Muse. We did a show with them in. Sort of late 90s. They were still teenagers. About less than 20 people came to that gig. So I haven't made any money out of them. Just stories, good stories, things like that.
They didn't have an iPad mounted in their bass guitar at that point, then.
No.
I do like Muse. There's,
we all thought they would go far.
Yeah,
they did.
Yeah. And they did. What a cracking thing. So music producing or in the music industry,
gigs,
and then
promotion, booking bands and that sort of thing. Yeah, basically live stuff. You might know. I mean, you might know. I don't know if you remember Marquee Club in London. I did shows there, and if you're into indie music, then you'd probably know the Water Rats in King's Cross, as it used to be in the 2000s. It was a big sort of. A big kind of hub in London for new bands, that kind of thing. It was very much like breaking bands. That's what it was all about. New stuff coming through. So I got to see quite a lot of well-known bands before they became big, which is nice, because they're a lot more down to earth at that stage in their development. Yeah,
that's a nice thing to be able to pull out at a party and say, I was at their gig when there were only 20 other people there.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that one.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a few other bands, I suppose. I mean, Keane, they became pretty big, didn't they? Yeah. We were quite friendly with them, and
good 90s band.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm not here to name drop. Let's talk.
I enjoy it. So that was past Allan. So what's future Allan do for a living? Is this something? Is the software developing your full-time job now?
Oh, no, it's a hobby. I mean, I just mentioned there, I live in Central Asia and in Kazakhstan. I've been here for about 12 years now, and settled here now. Met my wife here, and basically run a school. So.
Oh wow!
So before the pandemic, I had a real physical school and, a couple of classrooms and so on, just running my own thing. And post-pandemic, it's mostly been sort of going to offices and teaching in offices and doing stuff online and things like that. I had to make the switch during the pandemic, and I haven't really moved back to the physical. But it's nice. It's offline teaching is much more enjoyable than online. Really.
Face
it's like
face.
You were saying. Yeah, it's like you were saying. You and I meeting here online, and you meet lots of people and chat to them. But then when you go to a conference or something and meet them in person, it's a lot better, isn't it? You get the full person.
It's a completely different level of interaction. Yeah. There is something that goes missing when you introduce that barrier. Geography sucks. I've always said that. I get so frustrated with knowing there are all of these thousands and thousands of people that I really, really want to have that fit. That sounds wrong. That I really want to be in the same room as.
I want to get physical with, yes.
And but you just want that physical connection with them. You just want to be in the same room so that you can
give them a hug.
Hand over the thing that you're passionate about and say, look at this.
You seem like a guy who likes a hug. I reckon you do.
I do like a hug.
I
am a big hugger. I think that actually makes people step back a bit sometimes. So Kazakhstan, what's the retro scene like there then?
Well, it's pretty much non-existent, I guess, really. I mean, I actually, no. I mean, I did recently, I had a little browse on, they've got a kind of Craigslist equivalent here, let's say. And I did find a couple of old, those old Soviet Spectrum clones.
I was going to ask you exactly that.
And, I was kind of tempted. But even here, people have kind of got wise to the value of them. So they weren't really... They were asking the going rate, let's say, and it was like, wow, okay. I don't have a CRT here. I don't have hardware set up. I mean, perhaps I'll when it gets round to when I come back to the UK, maybe I'll pick something up and I'm sure you'd love to have a play with one of those old machines, wouldn't you?
I would, I'd give body parts for weird and wonderful things from places like that. I have actually been offered some in the past.
You don't need to get physical. Don't worry.
No. Okay. Well, you'll get a hug out of it at least.
We'll see what we can do. Yeah.
So, you do actually come back to the UK occasionally?
Usually just once a year. Yeah.
Just the once a year, or do you plan that around events?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I used to come back to do a bit of teaching in the summer, right? And then when the crash event started, which is I think 3 years ago now, it kind of coincided with the time that I needed to renew my visa. So I thought, why not come over? And then I thought, but if I'm going to do that, then I should maybe do something, right? Because I know Chris quite well, and obviously I'm not a kind of retro celebrity or anything, but people on the Spectrum scene kind of know my work. So I thought, how about that's when I spoke to Andy. That's when we set up the label, and launched it. And that gave us the idea of like, we could sell the games, the tapes on pre-order, and a huge number of the people that want those tapes are coming to the event. And
they can save one stone.
Save on postage, and then we'll get to meet them, right? Because you don't sell thousands. We do like a run for each game. We do about 100, right? So, you get this opportunity. People get that old school feeling of buying the cassette from a little shop, if you like, and you get to have a little chat, and they can ask you questions, and you get to give them a hug too, even sometimes, Yeah.
Well, before we go into more hugging and the shows themselves, we better talk about actually the games themselves, because we haven't actually touched on what they are, and not everybody's going to know what they are, because there are going to be people that listen to this that are purely into Amigas or purely Commodore 64. But your games are on the ZX Spectrum exclusively.
Yes, pretty much. Yeah.
So We first spoke when you contacted me a couple of years ago during the first charity event, when you offered me the physical games. Actually, you got somebody in the UK to send them to me.
Yeah.
The whole collection,
and you sent them around the world, didn't you?
I did, and they did a lap. They got lost in the post in America, and then got sent back, and then we bought them again. Yeah, they were part of that package, that infamous package. I think it might be that your games are cursed, but that could just be me.
Oh, well, it could be blessed. I mean, look, I've obviously clearly I have a bit of a nomad soul, so
yeah,
little vintage game reference there, but yeah.
A nomad soul, I like that. Yeah, it's the Sega Nomad.
So obviously the games themselves also fancied a bit of globe trotting, didn't they?
So I was really impressed with the quality of what you've actually produced, because they're not just handwritten labels and tapes with the labels ripped off and new ones put on. This is all new stuff, and I was like quite taken aback with the level of professionalism. Because I honestly, I'll hold my hand up, I hadn't heard of Midnight Brew before you contacted me, because I'm quite a hardware guy, not really into the software bit.
And the other thing is also it's a kind of niche, it's homebrew. Well, Spectrum is a niche, and then homebrew is a niche, and then people that want physical tapes for the homebrew is also a niche, right? The vast majority of people who are into the Spectrum are mostly playing, Jet Set Willy and Jetpack, and kind of living their teenage dream, So,
or testing computers.
Yes, but there's a decent, nice sort of community that are into coding new games and also enjoying them and supporting people like myself and others who do that. So. Yeah,
so let's talk about these games, which you sent me. I think it was about 5 games. I seem to recall.
That would have been what you mean over the last couple of years?
No, the ones, that set that you sent me.
Oh yeah. That would have been our first set. Yeah, we do 5. We did 5 each year. So the first year was 5 of myself and Andy, and then the second year we got a couple of other people involved, and then the third year we had. Each game was by a different author, I think. So, and now we're planning for the next batch. So that'll bring it up to 20. Yeah.
Wow.
And we also done a kind of special box set as well now. That's a new thing. So I don't know if you remember the game Frankenstein for the Spectrum.
Yeah.
So it's a very beloved game, but the author Colin he rewrote the whole thing, and originally it was written in BASIC and compiled.
Yeah.
Then later on he learned to code in assembly. And many years later, he rewrote the game and re-released it. And then he wrote the sequel, Dr. Acula, it's a two game set. And neither of them had ever been released on cassette. So we put them together in a package, and we got the original artwork. We got some Oliver Frey artwork via Chris at Crash, and we had that restored. We have an artist guy who fully restored it, and Colin gave us the original design specs, like the graph paper and stuff like this. So we made this real kind of slice of history, if you like, where you're kind of joining the homebrew coders of the 80s with the guys that are still doing it today, and it's a lovely thing, because actually it's kind of intergenerational, because there was a generation of coders who were a little bit older than you or I, right? And they were the ones coding the games, right? So Colin is kind of in his 60s, and Bob Hamilton, who did the Pyramid and Doomsday Castle, who we're also working with, he's in his 70s now, right? And they were the bedroom coders of that time, and we were the kind of slightly younger kids that were playing those games, right? So, and these are the early this is the early era, that's the era that I really like. It's kind of 82, 83, that kind of
same.
Just really kind of breaking through time period.
There's something special about those years.
Yeah, it's a bit like punk, isn't it? It was a kind of Wild West thing where everything was possible. It seemed like anyone could make a game and have a hit and become a star. That kind of feeling, right?
I have to say that I felt as a consumer of those games back then, that the people that made the games were rock stars to me. They were on another level. They were just somebody. I couldn't conceive of actually meeting somebody that was that special, that could do that special thing that I was enjoying so much, and on the other end of it. So, but you're actually in a community with these people now, with these same bedroom coders now. Oh, that must be amazing. Have you met any of your heroes, or are any of your actual heroes from back then part of this community?
Well, as I said, I mean, I've got to be honest and say, at the time, I mean, I always liked the games, but I didn't live in England in the 80s, so I didn't have. I mean, I had a Spectrum, but I didn't have that same quite the same level of immersion into the scene, I suppose, as you guys probably did. But I think that. Well, certainly, it's a wonderful thing. I'll give you the example of Bob Hamilton, right? Because he wrote Doomsday Castle and The Pyramid, and I can remember being sort of 12, 13 years old and playing The Pyramid and thinking, oh yeah, this is a cool game, and I remember it saying by Bob Hamilton, right? And as I, when I got older and got back into coding, Andy, who I mentioned, Andy Johns, he said, "Oh, perhaps we should make a game featuring this character, Ziggy, that was in those games." And I said, "Well, if we do, maybe we should try and find the guy who made those games and get in touch with him and get his blessing and do it the right way, Mm-hmm. So after a bit of internet sleuthing, I managed to track him down, and he hadn't. It's a wonderful thing, really, because nobody had kind of managed to find him before, really. He was he completely disappeared from the scene. He wasn't involved in the Spectrum. He retired. He would tell you himself, he basically burnt out. We just spoke about that kind of Wild West period, right? So in about 1983-84, the company, Fantasy Software, they just couldn't keep up with the bigger software companies that were emerging. And they constantly found themselves playing catch up. And ultimately, Bob just said, I've had enough, and retired, basically left the gaming scene and never came back, but tracked him down a couple of years ago. And
what must he have thought?
Well, it's a funny thing, isn't it? Because you kind of think, well, I kind of sort of put myself in his shoes. How would he feel if someone got in touch with him? You'd be thinking, that's a bit weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
But having said that, I mean, in the early 90s, I wrote an editor for Championship Manager on the Amiga, right? Wow. And I hadn't heard anything about it for years. And then about sort of in the early 2000s, somebody rang me up from Norway who'd found my number and said, "Oh, did you write this editor for Championship Manager on the Amiga?" I said, "Oh, yeah." And he said, well, we're in Norway and we've created a Norwegian version, but we really want to get the full version. Do you still have it anywhere? And I was like, no. What? But it so happened that I got in touch with the guy that I worked with on it, and he managed to get a copy, and we released it. So I don't know. Anyway, it's a funny story, but I was really happy.
Did?
It was kind of yes, but it was kind of fun, right? It's fun to have that sort of feeling. So when I got in touch with Bob, I found him on this kind of he's a photographer, and he's also a blogger, and I read some of his blog and kind of got a sense of who he was, and I kind of sensed that we were similar, kindred spirits in a way. He obviously loved travel and clearly quite a kind of spiritual sort of a guy. So when I wrote to him, I just thought, well, I'm just going to be myself, and I'm just going to write but I was writing in a style that I enjoyed, and he wrote back to me and said, "Oh, I really enjoyed your email, and I'm amazed that you got back in touch." And he gave me a chance, right? And then we got chatting, and then we sort of became pen pals, and we were talking about our favorite films and actors and all kinds of different things, life, philosophy, and became really good pen pals. And then as time went on, I said, we're thinking about maybe we might do this game. And he said, oh yeah, that'd be great, do it. I said, do you want to come to Crash next year? And he said, yeah, I'd love to. And he was absolutely, you can see it online. It's on, if you just search Bob Hamilton Crash, you can watch the interview. I think you'll enjoy it because there are two things really. On the one hand, the kind of the sheer surprise and delight that he has, that he realizes that his game is, people are still enjoying his game that he had totally left behind, So, and to find that there was a whole big crowd of people. I mean, admittedly, it's hundreds of people. It's not thousands, but the love is there,
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And he, he absolutely loved it. And people loved him being there because he was so kind of delighted and bewildered at the same time,
So you took the character from
scene.
You took a character from one of his games, yeah? To make into another game?
That's what we're planning to do. No, I mean,
this is a future game.
Yeah. He came to do a talk at Crash, and with me, I interviewed him, and we basically used him as an example of what it was like, why he got into the scene, because he was in that very early period that I mentioned that I'm really kind of passionate about, that early 80s period, 82, 83. And we spoke about what it was like to produce a game at that time, the pressures, the kind of, he was talking about how difficult it was to get tape duplication at Christmas because everybody wanted, the demand for tapes at Christmas was enormous, and the prices went right up, and it was very difficult. But there's that transition from sort of amateur to professional software houses, right? So, which I think, as I said, it's the most interesting period of UK gaming history, I suppose. It's
certainly as a consumer, it was interesting.
That's that really. We're going to be producing some games with him, so that's a lovely thing too.
All the games that you sell under the Midnight Brew, these are all original IP that you've created.
Wow. Well, not really. I mean, quite a few of them are arcade conversions.
Yeah, there's Jousters in there as well, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, it's right. So it's Roust. Yeah. It's kind of like
sorry.
It's not really Joust. It's Roust. Yeah.
If I'm speaking to your lawyer, it's Roust.
It's one of those. It's not Manic Miner. It's Manic Liner. So whatever, yeah.
Actually, yeah. So looking at your YouTube channel, which is Happy Coding ZX for those, and the link will be in the description. I do like looking at people's YouTube channels because you've been going, I think I read on there 7 years, and I love to go back to the beginning and look at the first video. And one of the first ones was something where you'd done basically a hack of Manic Miner. Was that your in? Is that where things started?
Okay, well, what I would say, I was thinking about this before I came on, right? Because I watched the previous interviews or chats that you've done, which are very good, by the way. So anyone who hasn't seen them, go back and watch.
Shucks.
But and I was thinking about, how did I get to enjoying this hobby the way that I do, right? And it kind of struck me that very potted history, right? So I was born in the northwest of England, but when my dad's an engineer, and when I was 5, we went to live in Africa, and I was in Africa for 4 or 5 years, and in that time period, we didn't really have TV, and we only got new toys once a year or so. It wasn't, and so there was a lot of kind of playing outside and making up your own stories and using, making do with what you had, right? And so I think that's how I kind of got that start in being fairly active with my hobby, if you see what I mean, right? And then we had a brief period when I lived in Yorkshire, and that was about 1980, 81. And that's when the kind of arcade games really hit the UK, right? I'm sure, if you remember that, but Space Invaders and all, Pac-Man, all that kind of stuff. And that was and that's, if I'm honest, that's always been my first love, right? Those classic games, that dawn of gaming, the simplicity, but the technical challenges and all of that. I just love that, right? Which obviously is reflected in the games that I make too. So, and they do say, don't they? I remember reading, was it just recently? They said like whatever you were into when you were 10 or 11, that's what you.
That's what you want to go back to.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to go back. I do not want to go back to 1981 Britain in Barrow in Furness. No, I don't want to go back there. But
okay. It was all right.
But I loved those games. They were just an absolute revelation, because you just hadn't seen anything like it, right? I mean,
what was the first one? What was the one that you walked into?
Oh, it's just Space Invaders.
It would have been a pub.
I'm Space Invaders. Space
Invaders, yeah.
Just, I mean, it's really difficult to describe what it was like to see that, right, at the time in sort of 80, 81 or something, right? Because, I mean, Space Invaders obviously is a kind of 1978, but it didn't get to the UK until, well, basically, I mean, there were a few in sort of Blackpool and other places, I suppose, but it didn't really get popular until the kind of import-export rules changed when Margaret Thatcher came into power. So, and then you started seeing a lot more arcade machines coming over. And it was, it was just, you just never seen anything like it. I mean, it's the equivalent of, I suppose it's like when you first try virtual reality, it's like a whole different thing that you've just never experienced before.
It's a whole different experience.
Yeah, it's like what? Your brain... You can actually control the television, right? You can and you can shoot things on the screen. Yeah, and it needs skill, and it's like, wow.
How can we convey that feeling to somebody that's 13 years old today? That sense of wonder of being able to
like I said, I think
into the screen.
Probably when like the virtual reality thing is probably the closest I can come to it, right? I mean, when I don't know if you've tried the new virtual reality, and you're just like, wow, when did this get so good? This is ridiculous.
I was quite an evangelist for the initial virtual reality, not the initial one, but apparently that's. I read the other day that my HTC Vive headset is 10 years old now. That's almost retro itself. How does that happen?
Yeah. Imagine virtual reality will be retro. That's something, isn't it?
Well, part of it is the old.
But anyway, going back to 1981, right? We'll say now, and then I heard that you could get these computers, right? That you could program and everything, right? I heard first I saw ZX81, and that I couldn't believe that either. That was just what on your telly, and amazing. And I got a Dragon 32.
Ooh.
And the thing about that is that then my dad then told us, 1982, that we were going to move to the Middle East, to Kuwait, right? And so I took my Dragon 32 there with me, but of course you didn't have any games, right? I mean, I couldn't access games. You couldn't go around the local W.H. Smiths and buy, games. So I had a handful, and I had a couple of books, and that's basically what happened. I just started learning how to code, and then I would get certain games and learn how to kind of hack them and change them as well. Because you're like,
coding as a survival tactic.
Well, for personal entertainment, right? Like I said, but the thing is, I was very used to that because of my experiences as a younger kid in Africa. When again, you just made do with what you had. You read a lot of books and you used your imagination, right? So I think that's always been something that I've been lucky enough to have fostered because of my upbringing. And then the same thing. Then a year later, I got a Spectrum, because by then it was like come on, I want to get something that I want to try some of these games, right? So that's when I got a Spectrum. Sort of, it would have been, I guess, 1984, because I got Night Law with it, right? And and again, I was like, wow, look at this! Look what you can do with this! This is incredible. But again, not a big supply of. I mean, I had one other person that I knew that had a Spectrum,
Right.
So we used to swap games, but again, it would be like once a year. Someone would come over and they'd bring you a load of tapes, C90s or whatever. And again, you'd learn how to. You kind of learned how to break into the game and look at the loader and kind of mess about with it and add pokes or change the graphics and different things like this. Like I did a whole editor myself for Manic Miner. That let you change the graphics and do all that stuff. Never published or anything because I was in a totally different country. It was just for my own personal thing, but. So it's always fascinated me how games work. And you see, I imagine that you today, given the job that you do, the work that you do, the hobby, the way that you pursue it, so you probably were the kind of kid that was always taking things to bits to see how they worked, right? And then put them all back together. And then count how many screws you didn't know where they went, right, and stuff like that.
I have very vivid memories of doing. One of my favourite stories that gets told about me is one day I decided to fix all. My father was a painter and decorator, or he was a builder, and he had a whole stack of step ladders. All stacked up outside the back door of the house that were just waiting to go out with. He was, he employed other people, and I decided to fix all of these by cutting off all of the ropes that stopped them splaying out. I got in so much trouble. I would just take things apart. I wouldn't necessarily put them back together. I'm getting better at that part of it now.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. I think you're trying to do penance, aren't you? You're trying to make up for all of those broken things that you.
I don't think I'll ever get there.
But I remember once. In the Middle East, right? These clamshells that you used to get the games in, like the plastic clamshells that the games used to come in. Well, in the Middle East, all music tapes came in those because they wouldn't melt in the car. Right?
A bit of insulation.
So I mean, I can remember if you had you used to have a cassette player in the front of your dad's car or whatever, and then if you left one of your tapes on the top of above the dashboard or whatever in the windscreen, so to speak,
it was like a greenhouse.
It would just melt. I mean, it would. Yeah. I'm not even. It would literally melt. It would be like just, and then that was it. It was done. So they used to come in those what they now call rave cases, and the thing about those is those rave cases they have a hinge, don't they? Right, that's a sort of plastic hinge that is fairly springy, I suppose. And what I did is I wired these up with contacts so that you could hit them, and it would make a contact, and then I wired that to a Kempston joystick. So that each one of those cassettes, when you hit it, it would be up, down, left, or right, And then I
thought you were going to tell us that you invented Guitar Hero before.
No. That would be funny, wouldn't it? But no, what I did is I
made a big joypad.
I got I connected it to. I had this thing that you could use to record drum. Well, it was like machine code. You could create these.
It was a music thing then.
Yeah.
Wow.
Drum drum noises.
Yeah.
And so you could basically be like, and you could just play with it, but and then you could you could make the border change when you hit it. And it was...
Okay, I'm gonna try.
That's what I was doing when instead of playing Jetpack.
I'm not going to match that, but I've got my story on that is I did make my own drum kit for Guitar Hero. Because nice. I hated. I used to play in this room. I used to play my Guitar Hero drum kit in this room, but it would be so loud because it was really plasticky and clacky, and I'd get quite enthusiastic about hitting these drums, and I would disturb people inside the house where they could still hear me through two brick walls. So I actually created a wooden. I made it out of MDF and mesh. My own drum set, which lasted all of 10 minutes. Fantastic.
Yeah, it sounds like you're a big gamer like me. I mean, I always just played everything from now till then. I think that's why. The reason I was telling you that story, I mean, obviously it's fairly amusing, I hope, but I think that's why I don't really have a lot of nostalgia for the games, right? Because a lot of the time I was messing about with things like that, and I still am, but I just enjoy it, right? And I still do. So I will play Spectrum games sometimes, but I think I've developed a bit of a sort of coder's prejudice, if you like, a coder's bias, where I keep seeing things and I'm like, oh no, you could have done better there. Oh, that's flickering. Why is it doing this? And you need to fix that. And then you know what I mean? So
yeah.
What can you do? Whereas
you become a big snob, basically.
A little bit, yeah. I am a bit of a snob, and I generally, I mean, I had an Amiga when I was a student, and but then when I left university and sort of in the late 90s, I discovered Sega Mega Drive and SNES and all of this stuff that was just going out of fashion. So it was really cheap. And so it was so easy to get a SNES and a Mega Drive, and for someone like me that just loves kind of arcade games and shooters and stuff, it was just like, wow, look,
this reminded
me
of something.
What have I been missed out? What have I missed out on? This is amazing, And those are so polished, right? So good, especially the Japanese ones.
You've talked about the 8-bit era and a little bit there about 16-bit era. Did you then progress after that? Have you always been a gamer?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And as I said, when I after I left university, and then I got I suppose it was in the late 90s, I got really into like the whole history of gaming and wanting to just discover everything. And there was so much available at the time. I mean, I had all the modern consoles, and I had all the I was always looking in car boot sales, and anyone who remembers what the car boot sales were like in the early 2000s, it was just the most amazing time for gaming. Sometimes you'd go and you'd come back with like 20 Japanese Mega Drive games for 10 quid, or whatever it might be. Perhaps I'm exaggerating a little bit, but
I don't think you are.
And you just found and learned so much through that about all the different, and then the internet was just starting to take off, right? So there was little hints of little communities and where you could find little projects or bits and pieces about games, and then the whole PlayStation and PS2 thing as well. And I just ever since, really, until probably the last in the last 5 or 6 years since I've got into coding again, I don't play all that much. And again, being abroad, it's that same thing. I'm in another country where I can't really go out and just buy the latest games. I could get them digitally, but I've never really been sold on the whole digital
I don't think
thing.
you've got much choice now. We've led very similar lives in some ways, because we had all this curiosity as children, and you went into the software side and I went into the hardware side, right, then we did the gaming thing, and then when we came out the other end, we've done similar things where you've then gone back into the software side and I've gone into this hardware side, and I just it's really strange hearing you say these things. You're echoing everything that's going on in my brain. It's lovely. It's nice. It's nice to meet a kindred spirit. Well, even if you're messing around with ones and zeros.
Yes. Yeah. And I love it. I just love it. As I said, some people say to me, oh, you should write an original game and this and this. And I'm open to that. But what I really love is the fact that, I'm kind of thinking about that kid that I was. I suppose that's a kind of nostalgia. When I was 12 or 13, it was like, I really want to play Frogger on the Spectrum. I really do. Why can't we get a good version?
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of make these games for that kid, who I'm going to make you one now. I'm going to make you a really good version of Frogger that you can play.
You're making that game for my friend Jason, my best friend Jason, who I've known for 50 years now. We've known each
Wow.
other for 50 years, and he got his Spectrum, and then I got my Spectrum, and when he got his one, he did a similar thing to you. He wanted to make the games himself. He wanted to see what was going on under the hood, and he's a very clever guy. He's actually a nuclear physicist now, but
Wow.
Besides the point, I've got very vivid memories of the progress that he was making trying to program his own version of Frogger, but he was doing it in BASIC.
Right.
But it was all that was available to us at the time.
Fool's errand, though, isn't it? We all know, but sometimes
I don't think he ever finished.
Sometimes the journey teaches you more than the destination, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think he's still. I mean, he does a lot of coding now in his job.
Yeah,
or he has done over the years, and I think.
Well, send him my Frogger. Sounds like he'd enjoy it.
I will. I'm still trying to get him to get his. I'm sure it's an issue 1 ZX Spectrum out of his loft.
Right. It's no, but it's the nice thing about those games. They're very simple, and they set you a very clear challenge, right? And there is a reason why people struggle to make them, because it is actually pretty tough, because the Spectrum is very, very limited, right? It is just a processor and memory. There's no hardware support, right? So you have to come up with all kinds of different tricks and techniques and try new things, and constantly, it's amazing to me. But there are, even across that whole time period, people are still coming up with new ways of doing things, right? And
has that changed much over the years? Do you think? I mean, what sort of games do you think have happened that? How different do you think games from back then would be with the modern techniques applied to them?
Well, I don't know. You know what? I don't know if necessarily they would be that different, because there are so many things that help you, right? You've got the modern tools, right? You've got this incredible resource of the internet. You've got the whole history. You've got 40 years of history. And you've got people and there's a whole kind of community there as well that encourages you, and you can talk to.
You don't have to write to them.
No, and there's no big deadline. You got to get it out before Christmas or whatever, because otherwise you're going to miss the Christmas sales. And I've always felt like you shouldn't put too much pressure on yourself, right? So, I mean, I have a kind of Patreon, and there are people who support me, and they get access to all my games, and that kind of frees up a bit of my time, and it does give me a little bit of a kind of it encourages a certain professionalism. I mean, you mentioned there
hold you to account.
Yeah, you mentioned the tapes and the quality and the polish and all of that, and that's part of it. It's like I'm deliberately choosing to do that because I know that it will give me that push, right? And so there are times, thankfully not that often, but there are times sometimes when I'm like, oh God, I don't want to do that, but okay, I'm going to do it because it's the right thing to do, and it'll make the game better, and you do it, and it's frustrating, but ultimately very, very satisfying at the end. When you get to the end and you look back, you've climbed the mountain, and then you get the view. You get the view from the top of the mountain, right? And that's the big challenge. And when you're coding games like that, especially, you kind of thinking it's kind of never been done before, right? No one's really done a proper version of Frogger. Why not? What's so tough about it? And you kind of look at that, and you also get into the mind of the original coders and start thinking, what is it that they do that makes it so fun, right? Those little tiny things, and there's so many things. This is the thing that I really love, right? It's a very different thing between gaming and coding demos, right? I don't want to sound pretentious or anything, but the thing that I love about coding games as opposed to demos is, in demos you're coding things that you want people to notice, right? But when you're coding games, you're trying to do things so that people don't notice.
Yeah.
Right? And it's much more subliminal. Yeah. So it's like the control system, right? You spend a long time getting the control to feel really, really nice and intuitive, right? And then when someone plays it, they don't say, "Oh wow, this controls." No, they just go, "Oh, this is good." Right? That feels that feels okay. It's not right? Basically, right? That's a lovely thing to see when you see people enjoying the game and kind of subliminally appreciating it, that they can just play it without a distraction, without a kind of flicker on the screen that reminds you that it's whatever, whatever it might be. But yeah, it's a lot of obfuscation and trickery.
Excellent.
Yeah. And nobody really knows how much work you put in, but you do, so that's okay.
That's lovely. Frogger is the game that you've just.
That's the latest
have you
one,
finished that?
Yeah, that was out a couple of weeks ago. Already on to the next one now. Yeah,
gold. And you've sent that to me, and I have. The only thing I've been able to do, I'll put my hand up again, is actually watch your playthrough of it, which I was quite impressed with his skills, if nothing else. But the game just looks brilliant.
A little bit of RZX playback. Not going to lie.
Oh, don't show me behind the curtain.
Yeah, I'm a coder. I'm not a gamer. I need to show people this thing, and if I mess it, oh, come on, rewind. Let's go. I just want to. I'm not really a YouTuber, right? I love to just record what I've been coding, talk about it a little bit, and show it to people.
Fair enough.
So people
what's
can
next?
keep up. Well, now I'm working on the Pyramid. Remake of the Pyramid, and we're doing
Tell me what
from
that
scratch.
is.
So the Pyramid is a game from around 1983. It's a little bit of a hidden gem. It features a character called Ziggy. It's a very simple arcade game where you have to you start at the top of a pyramid, and each room has a different type of enemy. You have to defeat the enemies, collect a crystal, which then unlocks the next level. And the aim of the game is to get down to the bottom of the pyramid. So, but it's kind of nice because every time you play, it's a bit like Outrun. You've got that kind of branching paths, right? So each game
the difficulty change depending on the path, right?
Each level, each level that you go down, it gets harder as you go through, right?
Yeah,
and it's a great concept, but and Bob himself would admit this. It was kind of rushed out a little bit for Christmas and not fully realized. I mean, it's still great. People still love it, but I've always thought it would be really fun to kind of turn it into a sort of mix of sort of Defender and Robotron in a pyramid.
Wow!
Right. So it would be kind of like you start at the top. You got different aliens and different patterns, and then you've got to protect the crystal, grab the crystal, take it through to the next level, and then a new wave of aliens with more complex attack patterns, different stages, and so on, and then go through the pyramid in your chosen path. So yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun, I think. Yeah, really looking forward to it. Yeah.
All right, excellent.
And I'll be doing
Doomsday
Castle as well, which was the sequel. So that will have a similar
do you do these
concept.
at the same time?
Well, not normally, no, but these two games are the same character and similar concept, right? So
yeah,
it's also a shooter. It's also, in this case, it'll be climbing a tower, and so we'll use new enemies and a few additional things like bonuses and power-ups and different things like this. But definitely, yeah, those two can be done on the same engine, and they'll be done in a box set together. So
there's one final question I want to ask you. When's the next time are you coming to Crash or anything like that? Have you got any plans to be in the UK?
And it's a 2-day event, isn't it? Do you think you'll make it this year?
I don't think I will. There are things happening in real life that are going to limit my ability to attend. But I'm at the Retro Fest this year, and I think that's all I'm going to be able to manage. But 1 year I'll get there, and we'll meet up.
Well, it is a 2-day event this time, so Saturday and Sunday, I think. But I'll be. I don't know. I don't think I'll be doing anything else around that time because it's mostly just spending time with the family. I don't normally see.
Yeah. Excellent. All right.
Should be fun.
All right, let's head off into the outro then. And so this retro train is chuffing its final chuffs as it pulls into the end of the line station. And I think it's safe to say we all enjoyed the journey as much as reaching the destination. Sometimes it's worth taking a moment to look out of the window, enjoying the scenery as it slides past our eyes. But we're here now, and we have to find a smelly taxi to take us home. Please can all passengers ensure they've not left behind any luggage, and we thank you for using Retro Rail. Can you tell I'll be in a railway museum in a few short weeks? If you enjoyed this podcast, please indicate this by using the well-labelled buttons to share that information with us. I guarantee it will probably cost you nothing. And if you would like to come and say hi to me in person, I'll be at Retrofest 25 on the 31st of May and the 1st of June in Swindon. And obviously, Allan's going to be at Crash, which is...
late November, yeah.
Late November. So you can come and say hello to him there, and he'll sign your games for you as well. And don't forget, as well as this YouTube channel, I have another much more mature and successful channel called More Fun Making It. And maybe you could take a look at Happy Coding ZX2 whilst you're feeling adventurous. The links will be where you most expect. And finally, thank you to Allan for being a perfect guest. Choo choo!
Choo choo!